And it's Tuesday. Time for some tacos, some metaphoric tacos, I guess. Time for some metaphoric tacos in the form of chatting. Welcome to Taco Tuesday. I am Shark Party, your host, as per usual. Sometimes we have guest speakers, so today it's just going to be me again. I am just, in case you're new to this, I am a fourth year graduate student in what's called social neuroscience, kind of combining social psychology and neuroscience to answer a lot of questions that can be, a lot of them are really relevant to like matters that we see kind of in our world today. So I'm a fourth year graduate student, so kind of been at it in research and I guess in this field for a couple of years now. So I feel more comfortable talking about some theories and some things if anyone has any questions regarding to anything I do. And when I say I feel more comfortable as opposed to when I was a first year in grad school. So that's me, and today's topic is going to be on education and learning. And when I say education, I don't only try to say like college or grad school. I mean like just in general, kind of like the benefits, because yeah, there's starting to be this, well, not starting to be, but I've kind of sensed or kind of been reading online, and when I go to a lot of social media, I just see a lot of negative things regarding educational institutions and how they have agendas or how it's like really bad for society and a lot of things. And I'm just here to kind of just talk about it, open up a space for anyone who wants to talk about it. If you're totally against it, I invite you to come present your points if you want to talk about it. But again, I don't invite trolls and I don't invite any sense of like negative rhetoric or name calling, because that's the moment you kind of stop debating using your head and you started relying on more primitive assault methods. So expect a ban or at least a mute if all you're going to do is cuss. So yeah, I'm not here to just promote college. I mean, I'm going to promote college, but not only to promote just college, but just to make people aware that it's okay to like follow different paths as long as you're learning and you're getting educated. One other, like an alternative path that comes straight to mind is trade school, for example. Some people might feel bad that, or some people might feel like there's a stigma behind it because like you weren't good enough to go to college or something like that. But I'm just here to chat about it and, get people's thoughts, opinions, and just say like anything you do to continue learning and grow as a person is positive in my book. So kind of want to just shed some light on that too, not just college. But I am happy to talk about, obviously, my college experience and why I value college so much and the college education in general. And now, of course, I will be talking about education from my experience a lot of the time. And my experience of education has been largely, actually all in the US for the most part of what I'm going to talk about today. All I'm going to talk about for the most part is my kind of like, we'll see with the chat kind of, if the chat deviates it anywhere, and we'll see where the conversation kind of takes us. But because it's a very big term, education. But I might just start with some kind of anecdotal narrative. So meaning I might just start with kind of some stories about myself in college and kind of my experiences and what I got out of college and what I think college is kind of for and who it's for. I can also go a little bit into grad school, why I ended up going to grad school, who it's for again, what it's used for. Yeah, there's millions of places I can take it. So I like broad topics sometimes because I think it can be very inviting for people to talk about anything. And again, it doesn't only have to be like academic. It could be like learning in a sense of like, you practice a martial art, right? And you just got your education, if you will. If you get your black belt, you got your education in like the way of whatever art you're learning, the martial art that you're learning. So we can talk about education in any sense. It's mainly in the sense of like learning and pushing yourself. So yeah, I want to talk about it because again, I was mentioning there's like a lot of negative stuff online and it gets a little bit frustrating. So I like to also just kind of vent out and put kind of a positive light on education stuff just so it can exist out there in the virtual space. I just I don't feel like reverting to a dark age where knowledge was consolidated to very few people, very small circles, very few circles of people had the ability to read and have knowledge, and they understood that knowledge is power. So I firmly believe that knowledge is power. So I just kind of want to talk about that too. Okay, so before I begin, I I'm so sorry if these introductions are getting very repetitive for anyone watching these on YouTube. I guess my best recommendation right now is either just come join the chats and start conversating and be part of it, or speed them up. I think there's an option to speed them up, like by 1.5, you can just speed through the intros, I guess. But I apologize if these are getting repetitive or redundant, or those are redundant in themselves if they're getting repetitive. So that being said, I'm going to give it about a minute before we begin talking about education. I need to hydrate. I hope everyone's Tuesday is going great. I've been working on my dissertation today. Yikes. Okay, let's see. 30 more seconds. I like this song. Oh, also, pardon if some of these songs come in and they're kind of interrupting a little bit. Apparently, my old playlist that I used to use from Monster Cat no longer works. So I had to quickly improvise and find another playlist that is able to be streamed on Twitch and has like zero issues, no copyright issues or anything like that. So I found it, and this is a pilot of that music. So apologize if anything comes up that's too jarring or anything like that. I'll try to take control of that as soon as possible. All right. So I guess let's just start with why discuss education. So I guess I've already tapped into it at the beginning and when I opened up with the Taco Tuesday, I was saying kind of like there's a lot of negative rhetoric, but I also think it's nice to talk about why education is good for even people that are already on board. It's good to like kind of reinforce why we put ourselves through X number of years of schooling, whether that was trade school or college, because sometimes we take for granted what skills we actually got while we were getting educated and how they'd actually apply to our real lives. So you can try to think about like, would I be as logical as I am now, assuming you think you're a logical person? If you don't think you're a logical person, well, then we can talk about why not if you want. But assuming you think you're a logical person, which I think most people do, you do have what's called a self-enhancing bias, as social psych has shown us, that we have this tendency to try to see ourselves in a positive light. So think about like, where did you actually learn to think in that logical manner? If you're the type of person that tries to think about different possibilities as to, let's just say you're, I always love this example that my bio professor gave when I was it is an example to highlight like the notion of like applying scientific method or logic, if you will. So like basically my bio professor, he stood at the front of the room. This is a bio 101, so my first course ever, fall semester in college, and he stands at the front of the room and he holds up a flashlight and it tries to turn it on and it doesn't turn on. So he basically tries to illustrate or tries to teach us the scientific method in a real world context, saying, okay, we can apply a scientific method to solve our issue here. My flashlight doesn't work. That's my observation. So why doesn't it work? That's the question I want to answer. So I'm going to try to answer by finding, by testing multiple hypotheses, so multiple guesses as to why it doesn't work. So what traditionally doesn't work in a flashlight, so then he asked the crowd like, okay, what's a possible reason why it won't be working? So a lot of people gravitate towards kind of like the most common or the most probable. Which by then in our lives we've probably experienced, things having gone out of batteries, and so that we tend to gravitate towards things we can recall the easiest. And so when batteries are, we tend to have to like switch out batteries more often than, let's say, the light bulb of a flashlight, right? So a lot of people were yelling out batteries, and then as because he wasn't just saying correct, he was just letting a lot of answers come through. Other people were throwing out different hypotheses. Oh, the light bulb is out. Other people, the wiring is messed up. You didn't screw it on tight enough. So you started hearing from very kind of normal, more like normal type hypotheses. For lack of a better term, I'll call it normal hypotheses, like the batteries are out, to more and more extreme things like, oh, the wiring is corroded or something, which could still be plausible, right? He didn't say no, that's not wrong right off the bat. We'd have to test those things. But he did say, okay, well, we're going to start with things that we believe to be most probable, things we have more experience with this. So this in traditional science you could call like your literature review. You go to literature, see what is already known before you begin your experimental design or your experiment, sorry. And I know I'm talking science, but I just want to mention this as an example of how just in general, if you ever took a bio course and you were exposed to something like this, you can kind of thank your bio course or your science course for teaching you to think in a very step-by-step manner to solve issues around you. So again, he has this flashlight, and so he goes, okay, let's test out this notion. So he opens up a new pack of batteries and he puts them in, and he screws it on tight. And he goes, okay, and he turns it on, and it doesn't work. So he goes, okay, so I have new batteries. So it could be the case that these batteries are also dead, but what's the probability of like new batteries being dead? It's quite low. It could still be possible, quite low. So let's move on to the next hypothesis and test it. So whether the light bulb was out. So he pulls out a new light bulb, puts it in, and it works. So, and I summarized this quite fast. There was more steps involved, and science does involve a little bit more steps. But what I'm trying to illustrate here is that what he taught us as like these growing adults is yes, we kind of would do that in our daily lives, but he was putting words to it and he was putting a logic to it, like a strict logic to it that you can apply across many contexts. So maybe we wouldn't have thought to apply that to our own personal lives. Like, yeah, I get the scientific method, whatever. How does it help me? Like, actually, a lot of the times in your daily life, you might be applying it automatically without even noticing it. And the more exposed you are to things like that, the better you will become, or like the easier it'll become for you, so to speak. So that's something that you could think about when I was mentioning, like, let's talk about the positives and sometimes we can take for granted. Just think about like your way of thinking about things and solving your issues and solving dilemmas and, problem solving, puzzle solving, all of that. How much is that due to your education? Just ask yourself. I don't have an answer for you. I mean, I don't know who you are, but just kind of try to reflect on that. Like just your method of thinking, how open-minded you are to various solutions to the same problem. Again, the flashlight's not on. How many solutions, possibilities, explanations can you generate? Your experience can help inform you of all the different possibilities you can come up with. So maybe you did have experience with flashlights that had corroded wires, so that one came to your mind first. Sorry, came to your mind first. That maybe other people never had that experience, so that wouldn't really come to their mind. So again, science kind of allows us, or science and education kind of allows us to practice that, put it in the put it in motion in like real time, if you will, with things around us. So when your computer isn't working or some software isn't working, what do? We Google it. We start with things that sound the most probable, and then we start making our way down to things that sound the least probable. That's kind of following the logic of science. And we don't. I mean, you can argue to a certain extent that we pick it up naturally, but from observing others. But my argument there would be education speeds it up exponentially. If that's the case, if we would learn this logic naturally, I'm not going to say no, but I think we mostly learn it from our schooling institutions. But I would argue that the education exponentially makes it faster. So the more you stay with it, the more you keep practicing this logic, the faster you can get at it. Just like the more you practice soccer, the better you can get at the sport. The brain is kind of similar in that way, kind of similar in some ways to muscles in terms of like it's one instance of this is called like long-term potentiation, and it kind of deals with memory. But basically, the more you kind of use a connection of neurons, the stronger the connection becomes, if you will. It's called long-term potentiation. I can put that into chat if anyone's really interested in reading about that. Long-term potentiation, LTP for short. So that's just a term if you're interested in kind of seeing about how like memories are kind of like muscles that you can kind of work out. It's also kind of unrelated, related, unrelated. It's also kind of why they a lot of like scientists or neuroscientists or just medical doctors will say, don't, like, when you retire, don't stop working your brain. It is like you want to just keep it active. That way it doesn't start to like, decay, if you will, like, or atrophy. That's the I guess the more proper term, atrophy, to mean like to shrink. So when your muscles, if you stop using your muscles, they can atrophy. You can have muscular atrophy, so the shrinking of your muscles. So your brain is kind of similar in that sense in some areas. I'm not entirely knowledgeable across every single area of the brain and how it functions with that, but some parts of the brain exhibit that type of pattern. So education is kind of a gym for your brain, if you will. Like if the gym exists where you can lift weights, well, reading books, doing exercises, practicing your logic, right, is kind of the gym for your brain, if you want to see it that way. Doing homework is doing reps. That's kind of the purpose of your homework, if you will. It's the practice. It's a low stakes time to practice and kind of hone your skills. Just like when, if you look at like soccer stars, they weren't soccer stars right when they were born. They practiced a lot, and they practice in private in low stakes areas, and then they build their way up. It's the same kind of sense with your homework and your tests. Your test is kind of your time to shine in front of others, just like a soccer star has to go shine in front of millions, if not billions, of viewers during the World Cup. But in practice, you're not really being viewed by everybody. So your homework is kind of that sense. You're putting in your reps. What I like to call the Occam approach to things. There's a lot of people I can cite for that one. But yeah, so that's something I like to talk to people that start to take for granted their education, like what they actually give them. It kind of built muscles for them. It put in it put in place systems or cognitive mechanisms, not mechanisms, but like kind of muscles that can function in a way that you might take for granted, like your ability to just sense when things aren't like they're not making so much sense to you. Like that doesn't make sense, and there's a lot of reasons why you might get those feelings, and sometimes they're wrong. But what I'm saying is, it just doesn't come from nothing. You do get taught something. Like the purpose of taking a lot of courses that at the time could seem very unrelated to what you're interested in, it nonetheless is giving you exposure to something that your brain could possibly connect to something else or use it in a way to inform other decisions or inform other logical issues that you might be trying to solve. And even if it doesn't you end up using it for something critical like work, you might end up with something like enjoying something. For example, I was a pre-med as an undergrad, and I took a class called Ancient Cities. What was it called? Ancient Civilizations and Buried Cities, something like that. It has nothing to do with what I study now. It had nothing to do with what I studied then. Back then I was pre-med trying to go to medical school. Now I'm, in graduate school trying to get a PhD in neuroscience. So again, what do ancient cities like Mesopotamia or Babylon really have to do with my neuroscience? Is it going to help me? Not necessarily like directly, but it can help me in various ways actually. And you can think about these possibilities. Of course, these are possibilities. I'm not saying these will be 100% true for you, but just think about possibilities, right? So one possibility in which it could help me is just in social interactions with other people. What if I find out during interview weekend at grad school, the people I interview with has like some interest in Mesopotamia, and we just kind of hit it off because I am educated to talk about it. I can kind of give off this image that I'm not only like a scientist, but I'm a well-read person, or like I'm kind of cultured in that sense. It kind of improves your first impression with people if you're able to talk about a lot of different topics because you're in a sense getting that education. Now, of course, you can't be knowledgeable in absolutely everything and be able to talk about everything. That's where education can also show us it's good to be humble, right? It's good to know our limitations. Just knowing your own limitations is half the battle, if you will, for a lot of social interactions or a lot of just things in general. Whether it be going to the gym, knowing your limitation of how much you can bench press is extremely vital. If you do too much, you might harm yourself pretty bad. Sorry, my throat is getting dry. I'm going to take a water break. Sorry. Okay, that's better. So again, we've kind of discussed a little bit about classes that might be seeming. We've discussed a little bit about kind of training and education in general. And right now I'm discussing a little bit about my kind of experience with ancient civilizations and buried cities. I was mentioning one possibility is, your social interactions. Another possibility that can help you in your life, which it's not necessarily maybe a career-driven help towards any career-driven goal or anything like that, but just for your own personal life, it could help you. Like, what if you're traveling and you go to a museum and it's talking about these things? Like, whoa, those are the temples I read about. Like, that's really interesting. You could probably form a stronger connection to that museum or to that information, which you can then remember better or just learn more about it. You'll already have a base level of knowledge that you can absorb other information that you might have not absorbed the first time around. That's kind of the benefit of establishing like a base foundation of knowledge. That kind of and I'm going to say American education here because again, I know that different countries all over the world kind of have different types of educational structures, and I'm not here to say one is better than the other. I'm just kind of speaking from my experience in the American education system. And if you're really unfamiliar with the American education system, after high school or your preparatory school, once you graduate that, you cannot go straight if you want to do things like law school, medical school, um, or even PhD. I mean, that's kind of normal for I think everyone else, but in other fields, I forget which other fields, you can't go straight to those fields in the US. You typically have to do what's called like a pre-law or pre-med, and that's where you get your 4-year degree, your bachelor's, and then you apply to medical schools to, get your MD, your medical doctorate, or to get your JD, your Juris Doctorate. So, as a pre-med, you kind of have to choose your own degree. There is no such thing as a pre-med degree. You can't graduate being a pre-med, so you choose a degree. Some people choose business. Some people choose, physics, engineering. A lot of people, you can choose whatever you want. A lot of people mainline, like they mainly go bio because it relates a lot to the body, and they're trying to go to medicine. But you can choose anything, is what I'm trying to say. So I went psychology and eventually tacked on biology as a different degree because I was taking a lot of bio courses, so I just got the degree as well. So now I'm going off. Okay, I had to explain the whole American education system. Um, shoot. This is where it'd be cool to be able to just replay what I was just talking about. I just went on a tangent talking about the American education system. In case anyone wasn't familiar, beforehand I was talking about like the base foundation with knowledge. Oh, right. So the American education, basically, while you're pre-med, pre-law, you kind of have all these other requirements to fill. If you're a bachelor's of arts, you have to take like language courses. If you're a bachelor's of science, you still need like other types of credits like humanities in there. So basically, ancient civilizations and buried cities was not. I didn't take that because I wanted to. I needed to for my degree. It was kind of forced on me, and that's where students can sometimes feel like a liberty's been taken. It's forced on you, and you kind of go into this negative attitude towards it, and you're not going to learn much with a negative attitude towards it. You're in there, so like you have to do it, and the reason it's not like. And I do want to say, I think I was one of those students in some of the classes where I would make those remarks saying, "This is useless. What good is this going to do me?" And now I'm really eating those words. And I just want to like warn people, like, and not warn, just like kind of just put it out there, just like, you know, these classes aren't complete waste. Like the people, the powers that be, right, for the education, the ones that are kind of making decisions of your coursework required to be able to label yourself a Bachelor of Science, right? The coursework required to be able to be a scientist, you need to have a knowledge in various fields. So what the American education system, at least from my point of view, is trying to do is make these well-rounded people that can not only just think about their own science, but think about it from different perspectives and also be able to communicate effectively. That's why we take so many English courses, so that way we can present our arguments and present our ideas in more coherent and concise ways. So all those years of English, you're like, well, I already speak it. I don't care about it. Well, you're just trying to practice. You're at the gym again, trying to practice, okay? Your brain is starting to notice patterns. How can you shorten sentences to be more concise, more effective? Get more out of your conversations, get more out of your social interactions, because your brain is seeking to automatize a lot of things. It likes to make things automatic because it's an energy saver and it's a time saver to make things automatic. So it likes to do things, it likes to put things on autopilot. That way your conscious can be free to do other things. If you've ever played music, my experience with music, the more I practice it, the more intricate my songs can get, because I already established that baseline foundation. That base foundation is there. Now my mind is more free to just think about other things I can add in. So as I'm doing a riff, now I can maybe add in a cool, I don't know, arpeggio on the right hand, or maybe I can add in a hammer on slide up or something. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, like, kind of the practice with music or physical sports is kind of the similar thing that education is doing for you and your brain. Whew. So education as a gym basically is what we've been talking about thus far. And of course, I'm not saying that like the more like you have to keep going there, right? There are plenty of ways. You have to keep going to college or university to keep going to the gym, if you will. There are plenty of ways to engage your brain, just like there are plenty of ways to engage in exercise. You don't have to have a membership to a club. There are plenty of ways to engage in exercise, and I'm happy to talk about those. I'm not going to talk about them now because I was going to start talking a little bit about my experience, kind of going from college and then grad school, just to kind of put that out there on the internet if anyone wants to hear like an abnormal path from undergrad to graduate school. I find a lot of undergrads that I talk to or that I interact with that have a lot of questions towards a grad student or about grad school. I find they sometimes find it surprising my story. Sometimes. I'm not saying it's an amazing story. I'm just saying it is a different story, but it's very possible. So I'm not going to go into all the ways you can, engage in education, but I just wanted to mention, and I want anyone who's listening to this still, or now, or if you just join us, I want you to just think about things that you might have taken for granted that education did give you. Like how big would your muscle be in your brain, so to speak? Not that I'm not saying size correlates to intelligence or anything like that. I'm just saying, you know, just like going to the gym and pumping iron, and you can track your progress and just be like, yeah, going to the gym does have an effect on whether my muscles are big or lean or whatever. I can run longer or whatever you're trying to measure. You know, think about education in that sense. Track your progress. Think about, oh, would I be this logical? Would I know this much? Would I've had that amazing conversation with my boss or with my employee because I knew about I don't know, their interest or they knew about mine. I don't know. Just think about how education has helped you. Think about maybe classes that when you were in those classes, or maybe you are right now, think about the classes that you just hate, and ask yourself, why do I hate it? Like, what is intrinsically wrong with the class? What's so wrong about ancient civilizations and buried cities? Okay, now, if I can't identify much there, maybe you can. I'm not here to say, absolutely every class is amazing. You might get, the bad luck, if you will, and just have like not so passionate professor. That can happen. You might just have absolutely no connection to the material, and that can happen too, and that's okay. We're not expecting 100% connection with 100% of things being said, and that you're absolutely in love, and that college is rainbow land, right? You're going to encounter stuff that you don't like, but some of those things that you overcome end up helping you a lot. And so just ask yourself, like, is like maybe I can turn this into a positive. I don't like this class. I don't like statistics. I don't think I'm going to use statistics. I used to think, when I was first learning statistics, like I'm never going to be a statistician. I'm not going to be a CNN. I used to think like I would have to work in Wall Street. This is when I was like a preteen-ish, like that statistics is for people that work in Wall Street, and all those numbers scrolling across the news are stats and stuff like that. Now look who's laughing at, well, I'm laughing at myself. I only have to work. I only work with statistics now. I work with a lot of stuff, but I'm saying is statistics is a language I have to learn, I have to master, and I'm still learning it till this day. Um, so yeah, so just ask yourself, okay, well, is there a possibility that this could help me? Can I derive anything positive from this? Right? Ancient civilizations, like I do like traveling, so like when I lived in Berlin and I went to the Pergamon, the museum, right? I was able to connect with some of the material because I remember from my class, ancient civilizations, various cities. I was like, "Whoa, that's the Gate of Ishtar!" Like, what? It was there, right in front of me. I'm like, I remember learning about the Gate of Ishtar and how important it was, and even descriptions of it. It was a blue gate, so I expected before I even went into the Pergamon, I was already expecting it, and I could see it was really cool. And like I could already it was just cool to be able to connect what is written in a book and almost seems like fairy tale. You're studying a lot of European history, but from the Americas, it sounds like fairy tale. And then you actually show up and it's there, and you're like, whoa, I don't remember who built it, but sometimes you can remember like, oh, it was built by this guy, and then you can start reading like, oh, I actually know what this is for. And then so instead of reading what is it, you instead read the second panel next to it, like, all right, who built it? And so now you already know the baseline. So now you go over to this and you learn more, and now you extracted more enjoyment for your life, if you will. You're more fulfilled or satisfied. Your brain is more satisfied too, if you will, with that whole experience with the museum. So just think about your education. Some classes, have they helped you understand certain topics that may not deal with your direct life, your immediate day-to-day life, but has it helped you there too? That's not nothing. That's what I'm saying. It's not nothing. And if you're a person that has to go through it anyways, well, why not try to find the positive? What are you gonna lose? You just want to continue not liking your class? You have nothing to lose except that anger. You can lose that. Or the frustrations. All right, let's give it another minute, and then I'm gonna have to do another kind of reintroduction, just in case anyone fills in. Let's give it a minute, see if anyone joins in and wants to chat. And again, I do want to mention for anyone listening, whether this is YouTube or live or recorded on Twitch, First of all, you're a champion. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It just continues to motivate me to continue just talking. But I do want to say I invite you to come and chat. These aren't intended to be lectures. They're intended to be talk, just chatting with people and just kind of get ideas across. And then also for me to learn from everybody, just learn from your all experiences. I'm giving my own experience, and that's all I really have for a lot of these situations that I'm talking about, or a lot of context I'm talking about. So I invite anyone to come talk. And I also, if you have questions, I more than invite you to come and ask them. And also, I want to make sure that it's also clear that Taco Tuesdays can also be a space for anyone to vent. There's a lot of craziness happening out there in our world, regardless of where you're from and who you are. We all probably have something we can vent about. And so I just want to say that you can do that during Taco Tuesdays, or actually during any stream, whether it's Gaming Science Friday or Taco Tuesday. But I want to just really stress that during Taco Tuesday, that there's no game or anything to distract anybody, and we can always, um, we can always just sit there and just vent if you need that. And if you want a third party perspective, an objective, graduate students perspective, I'm happy to try to I'll try to do my best to be objective and be scientific about it if you want. So yeah. So for the last kind of bit here, these tend to go for about an hour. I try to cap them before an hour so it doesn't take forever to upload to YouTube. So for the last little bit, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my college experience and going into grad school. So when I mentioned that my story is a little bit atypical, it's in the sense like just from the surface, it's already atypical because I took 4 years of gap years between undergraduate and graduate school. So again, if you're unfamiliar with the process, basically when you graduate high school, so around 18 on average, you're going to spend around like 3 to 5 years in you're doing your bachelor's degree. I spent 5 because I got 2 bachelor's degrees. I was quite young. I was young in high school, so I graduated being, I think, 21 or 22. I graduated being 21, something like that, 22. Anyway, sorry, I don't even know why I'm trying to do the math. But basically, yeah, then you do your bachelor's, and then typically what a lot of students will do is they kind of are faced. A lot of students feel they have 2 decisions, like they have 2 options they can do. Either take a gap year, and what a gap year means is you're going to take a 1 year off from school and then go apply to grad school and go to school again. So you just take 1 year off to kind of relax between graduating your bachelor's degree and going to graduate school or medical school or law school or whatever post-secondary school you want to go to, or if it's going to trade. Now, again, I don't know much about trade school and the trajectories there or the paths people take to kind of become the experts or the gurus or the professionals of their arenas. So I invite anyone that has taken that route to come and give us your perspective. That would be amazing. Anyway. So gap year is traditionally like 1 to 2 years. So mine is kind of atypical in that it was 4 years, so twice the average basically. I did get a lot of positive feedback and negative feedback regarding that gap year, but that's a more minor detail that I can say for a little bit later. So I mentioned in college I wanted to go to medical school. I was the type of person that was interested in just trying to kind of help people, and I felt doctors did that, and well, they do. And I was also just really interested in the brain and learning about the brain and how it works. I just want to learn everything I could about the brain. I found it fascinating. Before all that, I was always fascinated in astronomy and space. I just found that the mysteries of it and like just kind of like the workings of it were just so fascinating to me. Like they're so cool. And the other thing I really appreciated about physics and space and things is there's the objective nature to it. Like and I'm not saying that it's completely an objective science. Obviously, as scientists, we can fall victim to biasing our data or biasing our interpretations of the data. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that nature is there, and we're trying to measure it with science and trying to understand it and experiencing it. So I took this in high school I took this psychology course, which is kind of what really sparked my interest in the brain, because in this introductory high school level course in psychology, we started talking about like behaviors, and I started conceptualizing behaviors as like independent events and trying to explain why would Sally purchase that sweater over that sweater, and I started trying to see like every social interaction and try to see every behavior around me as kind of like an event, an independent event that you could try to track and try to predict and try to explain. And that's kind of the way I kind of see psychology and social psychology really is kind of that science of doing that, in a sense, in a very crude nutshell. Um, so, and the example I gave, I know, is marketing, but you can apply that in a lot of different settings. Like, you can ask like more real life situations, like why are people religious? Why do people some turn to some religions and not others? Right? These are things that you could try to ask questions. Again, I started this Taco Tuesday talking about the bio and posing a lot of questions or having a lot of observations that then you can test with hypotheses or testable questions. So yeah, why are people X, Y, or Z? Why do they conform under these situations, or when will they conform, et cetera, et cetera. So I started to see that, and so that started to make me realize how complicated the brain is to be able to not only keep us alive in a sense on a day-to-day basis and navigate a 3D world, doing all these calculations of walking and making sure you don't run into objects, and when you want to grab something, calculating the distance between you and the object so you can extend your arm at the right length, and then not overdoing it with your strength, right? If it's something very fragile, like your brain is calculating how much strength to put into your hand to grab it, just enough to get grip to bring it to you, but not enough to break it. So just like think about that. Like that's already impressive enough as a brain. That's like a pretty cool organ. And just when I started really realizing what the brain's in charge of, on top of that layer, which is kind of the basic layer, if you will, these are all automatic processes, right? I'm not consciously thinking when I go to my water bottle here, I'm not consciously thinking, oh, that's about, I don't know, zero point 0.1 meters away from me. I'm going to extend my arm about that many centimeters, 10 centimeters, whatever, and I'm going to grab with this much force. And no, I'm not thinking, sorry for the really long example, but I'm not thinking that. That's an automatic process. I just look over, boom, I know how much pressure I need to apply to open this, and I know like at what angle to lean it to get just enough water. Again, experience can also inform me. I've done this many times, automatic. Again, education can do that in a senses like that when it comes to like practicing your scientific method and applying it and being logical. Yeah, so those are all automatic. So your brain's doing this, and then you have very complex behaviors out there. People are very intriguing. They're fascinating people. There's so many of us, and there's so many different behaviors that we exhibit in so many different ways, and through so many different forms. It's a universe in itself, and that's the way I saw the brain. I'm like, wow! Not only is there this base thing that I need to understand, that I want to understand as a mass, as a solid thing, like this biological organ, akin to saying not only is there space, that there's nature, and I want to understand like planets exist, but there's also all these other things interacting with it that I have zero idea what's going on, kind of like black holes, dark energy, those things in the universe. The brain is kind of the same way. There's like interaction of all these variables. It's just an immensely complicated organ, and that's the way I kind of saw it, and I wanted to start learning about it. I'm like, all right, let's start trying to explore as much as we can of this internal universe. I think I even remember on one iteration of my grad school applications, I think I even put that line saying like I really want to be like a pioneer, if you will, on the in the internal universe that is between our 2 ears, something like that. I don't know. It was kind of nerdy. But I think the finalized version of my personal statement didn't have that line, but I kind of remember saying that. But yeah, no, that was true. So I thought, how could I accomplish the two goals? Both help people, but also explore the brain. And I thought psychiatry was the answer. So I'm not going to go into super detail because again, we're kind of reaching almost the hour mark. We're 43 minutes in. So I'm going to try to summarize these a little bit. In a very general sense. So there's a lot of nuances and intricacies and a lot of details to the story that I'm happy to share with anyone, especially if you're currently like an undergrad right now, and you want to hear like someone else's perspective or kind of their experience. Because right now I'm interact with undergrads that sometimes are really stressed because right now they can't get into labs and they feel like their whole future is just gone. And I'm happy to share some experiences that kind of can provide some evidence that in the contrary. Okay, so again, I entered being a pre-med, and I took psychology because again, I was a psych major because again, I wanted to learn about the brain. However, I did do my research on what's on the MCAT, what medical schools want from pre-meds, and like how to maximize my probability or my possibility or my chances of getting into medical school. So lo and behold, you do, like, it is recommended you take a lot of bio courses. So instead of taking electives in college, such as like some friends took like Harry Potter, the interpretation of Harry Potter, others like took a language, things like that. I did take a language, but that was for fun. But my electives were all bio courses. So I had to satisfy the courses necessary for psychology, but my electives were my bio courses. So just so I could be so I could be prepared for the MCAT, not because I wanted a bio degree. But the more I learned about psychology and the more I learned about how people study psychology and do psychology and apply psychology and how we find out a lot about psychology, like how do you test theories, the more I just liked science. The more I was like, this is cool that you could take very abstract things like behavior, like people's motivations, like people's choices, things we can't really have like objective access to, like someone's belief, someone's attitude, someone's prejudice, someone's stereotype, someone's anything really like that in that nature. How we actually go about measuring it in a scientific and objective way. That was fascinating to me. Like, how do you do that? Because if you can do that objectively, then in a sense I could combine that with biology and start to understand this internal universe a lot better. Because biology, what I felt was missing from understanding the brain, from me being able to understand the brain, what was missing was it rarely talked about context. So it talked about cells and how they function. And yes, I understand I was only an undergrad. We can't take it to that level. But the more I would read on the internet, the more I would just dive into biology as a science. I didn't really see it being too interdisciplinary. And this is back in my studies. I do understand neuroscience is blossoming right now, so it's probably more so the case that they do share a lot more. Psychology and biology is where I'm getting at. But what I felt at the time was that biology didn't really take into account context. So it explains action potential. I understood that, and I get that cells under certain circumstances, fight or flight, will do this and this and this, and that's kind of contextual. But what about in our everyday lives? How can I apply it to the human brain? A lot of the stuff I learned in biology courses was like in the animal and the mammalian brain and neurons from and just in a very natural setting. But we have to be realistic at some point. Like, we're humans, we're no longer in the same category as some animals that we study. Sorry, this song's a little jarring. I'm going to change it. We're no longer in that same category, so we have to think about our social context. So how would a neuron react then to someone that I find attracted I'm flirting with and rejects me versus someone I find attracted I'm flirting with and accepts me and accepts my date proposal? How would the neurons fire differently, right? The social context is vastly different. So how could biology help me predict that? It can help me predict that to a certain extent, but I would need to know a little bit more about the context and what science can help me learn about that. Well, social psychology, it kind of helps us understand ourselves as humans with social interactions on a one-to-one. We try to understand the person in social situations. So this is what kind of differentiates us from sociology, which is trying to understand groups of people as a group. Social psychologists, we try to understand the individual that belongs to a group or that belongs to a social interaction, or engages in a social interaction. Anything social, really, with the social mind, how it works. So I felt that psychology as a science and biology as a science could be the perfect union of understanding the brain the way I wanted to understand it. I want to be able to predict every single behavior that, if I get rejected by the person I was flirting with, that my brain will release this amount of neurotransmitter at this concentration, and that I will then behave in this way, and my muscles will move I wanted to be able to predict all of that. I want to be able to understand that. But to be able to do that, I needed a lot of equipment. I couldn't just measure it with a hammer, or I couldn't just fix it with a hammer. I need a screwdriver. I need all these different tools, which again, education can give you a lot of different tools, by the way. That's another thing we sometimes forget and we take for granted, that we are given various tools to work with when we are educated. So sorry, I lost track again. So I wanted to understand the brain, and I think I've kind of driven that point home. So what I started to notice as I worked in psychiatry and I kind of got more exposed to medicine was, although they're doing great work, fantastic work, it wasn't going to necessarily satisfy that need for being that like scientific mind. Hello, Building Olympia. Welcome to Taco Tuesday. I'm in the middle of just kind of chatting about my experiences in education, but I'm happy to hear anything that you want to talk about. Otherwise, I can just keep chucking on. But welcome. And if you're completely new, my name is Shark Party. I am a fourth year graduate student in social psychology and neuroscience, so what we call social neuroscience. And I'm currently working on my dissertation. Currently working on that beast. But okay, cool. Then I'm just gonna keep trucking on. But if at any moment you want to talk about your experiences, we're all, when I say we right now, I think it's just me. But I'm happy to hear anything. So anyways, I was just mentioning kind of my experience in college. I was a pre-med first. I was kind of in track to go to medical school, and just being exposed to psychology and science and the scientific method and all of that, and getting involved in research labs and stuff like that really started making me want to be a scientist, as a professional. Like, how do I become a professional scientist? Someone that can just sit there and ask questions and get the answers to those questions in a scientific setting. And scientists, you can think about academics or professors, but also a lot of scientists are belong to private sector, so they work at private corporations as well. So that's kind of, I started to shift near the end of my college degree. I did graduate still being a medical or pre-med student, and I did end up taking the MCAT. Um, but I was kind of on the fence at that point, so I didn't apply. So what had happened then, so now I'm going to start to transition to kind of my experience in grad school, because right now I'm a fourth year. I think I've mentioned that, but I'm a fourth year grad student, so I have had kind of 3 years and a half of being in grad school to kind of talk about, and I can compare it to college if anyone's interested in knowing any differences between graduate school, PhD, and undergraduate school, bachelor's degree. But basically, yeah. So I had graduated being pre-med, and I just felt like, at least where I had worked in psychiatry, there wasn't enough agency, or I felt like I wouldn't have enough agency as a person, to be directing my own research the way I want to direct it. I felt like, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the case for all psychiatrists. This is just my perception at the time. Was that pharmaceuticals have kind of influence on what's going on, which drugs you should be prescribing and things like that. The other thing I kind of felt that I saw a lot of medical doctors kind of had a shortcoming, and I'm not trying to say anything negative about medical doctors. They have very stressful degrees, very stressful lives as is, and they're doing their best. I understand that, and they're amazing people. But one of the shortcomings to the science, if you will, that I kind of saw was they lacked a lot of context. So I do remember I put myself just to test it, because I feel like I'm a scientist at heart. So just to test, kind of, if I could see myself going to medicine, I put myself in the patient spot, and I asked to be diagnosed. And with just 10 questions, they diagnosed me with a lot of things. And those 10 questions didn't ask any contextual information questions. So it was asking about like stress, for example, and it was asking like, in the last week, how much stress have you experienced? How much anxiety? Do you feel like overwhelmed? And I was putting really high for everything, because it was true. I was feeling that way. But they didn't ask why. Why did I feel that way? Well, I was a student in the middle of finals in one of my final quarters of my undergrad degree. Of course I'm going to be stressed. So it's only natural that I report that. If I didn't report that, it's either that like something's off about me, that like stress just doesn't kick in, or like I have it completely under control, which is can happen too. But I'm saying is, I was just really stressed for finals, really stressed for my future. I'm about to graduate, not certain of what I'm going to do with myself, things like that. And the questionnaire did not ask anything about that. Yet they wanted to prescribe me anxiety medications, and yeah, like anti-anxiety, antidepression medications, just based on that like very little evidence, very little information. So I felt like, okay, psychology also satisfies that, in that you have to take into account context, otherwise we won't really capture a legit, valid, what we can call in our science like an ecologically valid situation. So when I say ecologically valid situation, what I mean is, so as a scientist, you try to kind of build models, just like an architect builds a small model to like design it, see it, and get all its things, try to do a proportional and present it to people before they build the real thing, because that's a huge investment. They try to make a model first. We do this, science is kind of a similar way. We try to build models of real world situations and do our tests on the model, and then try to generalize, or if the statistics allow it, of course, the statistics, we have to be backed by statistics. We try to generalize it or try to present it as the broader theory to the broader population, if you will. So scientists were building these smaller models as well. And so by when we mean ecological validity is how accurate is our model, how accurately does it represent the real world? So if I design a psychological experiment on how much does coffee affect your grade or your performance on a test, and let's just say you're a person let's just say the average person drinks 1 cup of coffee a day, but I made everyone drink 10 cups of coffee for my experiment, the validity's shot. It's gone. So I could say like, hey, drinking coffee makes you fail. I could conclude that from a faulty. This is like a very invalid experiment, but I could conclude it because 10 coffees, assuming the average participant can't handle that much caffeine, would probably give them tachycardia and make them like feel really horrible and like overwhelmed, and just they might even leave the classroom. I don't know, but it would just make them feel just really bad. So you'd predict that they would do worse, and you might conclude that, but that would be bad science, right? So that's what I mean by ecological validity. If I wanted to test how much does coffee affect test grades, I would need to kind of understand what I'm trying to measure to begin with. So, okay, on average, how much does the average person drink some coffee? Okay, now let's see. Does drinking coffee compare to people who just don't drink it at all? So, does that change test scores? It's a crude example, but that's that I just gave it to just define a little bit of ecological validity. So what I felt medicine was kind of missing was ecological validity. It just asks questions, and it in an out of context manner. And I understand that a lot of, especially hospitals, can be extremely busy. There's very limited time. And I'm not talking about like in the ER they should be taking into account context. Of course, there's a time and place for everything. And when someone's life is at risk, like you can't sit there and contemplate the entire context. You just try to do your best in the moment. I'm not here to cast judgment on anybody like that. I'm just giving you Twitch, and I'm just giving the world kind of my experience when I was an undergrad. And again, I was younger, so I also had some naive perceptions as well. I'm not here to say that I'm flawless and I knew everything and I know everything now in no way. So yeah, that's kind of what I perceived. And so I for some reason, grad school still didn't really hit me hard on the head that was the like kind of the path for me. But I was like, okay, I think I still want to do medicine, but I'm going to try to do medicine and try to just be a researcher in medicine. Again, I was naive. I didn't really think about MD, PhD. I kind of knew about it, but I didn't think about that as a career for me. I don't know why. It wasn't connecting. I was informed of it, but I didn't know why. So it didn't really hit me that I wanted to go to grad school until I actually left the country, and I went and lived in Germany for about almost 2 years. That's why if you ever see my bio, my about, it says like language spoken. German has an asterisk. I used to speak it at a pretty decent level. If you're familiar with like language levels, I used to speak it at B2 level. I don't think it's there anymore, but I'm happy to practice with anyone that wants to talk German. I'll try my best. So there's an asterisk to say like I don't know. It's like half of a language at this point. But it wasn't until I went there that I got enough space and I kind of removed myself from a lot of stuff. To really just give myself space and think about like, okay, what do I want to do with life? What makes me really happy? And what I kind of found was like the thing that I just naturally do and I love to do and I love to do it in its entirety is science. Like I have so many questions. I'm a very curious person. I love finding ways of answering those questions. I love coming up with the solutions to answer my questions, and I love interpreting the data that comes out of those solutions that I've come up with for the questions I've come up with. And I love trying to build on the knowledge and try to become master of nature, if you will. Like, okay, if I can, essentially like the airplane, if you want to take an example of how we can become masters of nature, like by playing around with our scientific minds, is like, all right, I find that if my vehicle starts to kind of lift a little bit, what does that mean? I'm talking before flight was like discovered and stuff like that. Like the curious mind is kind of what I'm trying to echo here. Is like, whoa, I'm starting to lift. So to start tweaking some variables, like what if I made, things that can go out and get hit by the wind, right? That could cause me to go up. So in other words, wings. Like, or maybe some of the inventors saw birds and saw, well, they can fly. Why can't we? So I'm just saying is. I just like to be able to play with factors and variables in that sense, kind of um, like someone that works with clocks or machines, right, with cogs, and be spinning the cogs and make them do things that through science and the scientific method, like make them do predictable things. And when it comes out, when your prediction is supported by your evidence, it's such a good feeling. Like, yes, my intuition or whatever I thought, my scientific reasoning is being supported by the evidence, and that is such a cool feeling. So kind of Germany is kind of where that had happened for me, and where I kind of realized that's kind of like the core of what I want to do, is just kind of be around that process and do that process. So from Germany, I started doing all my research into grad schools, how to get in, and I just started from block zero. I had done all the work for medical school, built the relationships I needed to. I was in the pre-med society. I volunteered like 300 some hours or something like that. Community serve, not community service, like in hospitals and stuff. I was reading on forums that that's like really liked, to show you're willing to give time because they want to accept good Samaritans into medical school. That way, they have good people being doctors. Essentially, that I read so much on how to get into medical school, and I did it all. So basically, to go to grad school, I was beginning almost not. I'm not going to say entirely from block zero. Obviously, like bachelor's is worth something, and a lot of the things I learned in being a pre-med apply to grad school. So it wasn't an absolute waste, but um, it was nonetheless kind of starting from zero when it came to unknowing the battle I was about to get into. Because again, knowledge is half the battle, and knowledge is power. Okay, I need a drink of water. Let's take a 30-second break. Let's see if anyone has any comments, questions, experiences they want to share. I'm going to take a break right here. Whew. Hope everyone's Tuesday is going great. And if it's already Wednesday for you, happy Wednesday. Okay. So just quick recap. I'll try to keep it to like 20-second recap. I've already talked a little bit about education in a general sense, not just college and grad school, but trade school or just learning in general and the benefits of it and how we can kind of see educational institutions, whether they be college or trade school or a music school, how we can see those as gyms for our mind, if you will. I've already talked about kind of how a lot of people can take education for granted, what it's given us, like our logic, our ability to think logically, things like that. So I already talked about that, and then I've kind of already recapped a little bit of my college experience, which I'm happy to dive into if anyone needs it. And now I'm about to begin kind of talking the transition into grad school. Well, bro, I just watched the Pizza Rules, and before being able to watch this. What? Okay, first of all, what's up, SPS? Welcome. But wait, what's going on? Bro, I just watched the Pizza Rolls ad. Oh, Pizza Rolls ad. I missed that word. Before being able to watch this, you're a big now. Yeah. Um, yeah, unfortunately, or I don't know. I don't know what to say about it since we're live right now. But yeah, after you get 50 viewers, you become whatever it's called, affiliate, and so it happens automatically. Like I wish I could turn them off. I just want to be able to, provide chats and everything free of that. I wish I could. If there is a way, if anyone knows of a way that I could just stop, I'm not here to earn money. I don't want the money. I'm here to provide a space. I mentioned this at the beginning again. I guess I'll mention it again now. I'm here to provide a space for anyone to use to talk about science education and to give science and education a positive light on social media because there's a lot of negativity out there regarding those topics. And so I just want to give it a positive light on social media. So I'm not seeking any sort of money compensation. I'm not seeking donations. I'm not seeking anything like that. I think science can speak for itself, and I'm here to give it its voice. I think science can do it. I really love science. So, yeah. So if anyone knows of a way to block those ads, I don't care if I stop making money or like I make like a penny every like 20,000 ads or something. I really don't know all the rules, but I guess I can try to investigate if I can get rid of them. But yeah. Okay. But anyways, welcome SPS. Or just talking about education, learning, things like that. I did even talk about just learning in general. I even talked about, like when I said learning in general, it can be in any form. I even talked about karate and getting your black belt. So is there like a specific question or problem you would like to address with science? So right now that's kind of what the dissertation is about, right? If you're unfamiliar with that term dissertation, it's kind of like a final project to grad school, like your ultimate your culmination of education, like everything you've learned. Ooh, hydrate. I'm running out of water, but I'm gonna hydrate real quick. Just did, boy. But yeah, so a dissertation is kind of like that final project where you kind of demonstrate to a panel of other scientists that already have PhDs, so your committee. Um, Demonstrate to them from the beginning and end of science. So you start off with your own observation, you do a literature review, what's already known about your observation, and then you present to them kind of your hypotheses, what's called like a dissertation proposal. Like, this is the study I'm proposing, this is what I want to learn, and this is what I think we can extract from it. So and then yeah, you do the whole experiment, and you show them that you can, design experiments, execute the experiments, analyze the data correctly, and present all your information to a public. So you do have to do a public defense as well, where you just give your whole entire research presentation, and then the panel questions you and gives you the comments and critiques. And they might be like, okay, why did you use this statistical model, not this one? This one seems more fitting. And you have to give your justifications to absolutely everything, why you did things a certain way you did. So with that being said, the specific thing I'm kind of addressing in my science, or in science right now. So in general, I have billions of things I want to address in science, and that's the beauty of it, or the curse as well, if you will. It's a blessing and a curse, is that we have an infinite number of things we can answer. So we'll never really be out of work, but by that same coin, we'll never be done. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But right now, what I'm investigating a lot into is intergroup conflict, intergroup processes. So just kind of founded in a lot of what's called social identity theory. So who we are and the social groups we belong to, and how they influence us as individuals, and how that influences in social interactions with other individuals. For example, a social interaction between intergroups that would fall under intergroup conflict is racism. Right? So what's the cause of racism? What's the function? Does it have a function? What's the biology that gives rise to racism? Now, my particular interest doesn't only lie there. That's just the topic I'm currently studying, because one, it's incredibly relevant right now to our society. There's a lot of things, on social media or a lot of chaos that's happening around the world that deals with social identity. And yeah, so that makes it, I guess, that makes it extremely, not only does it make it extremely relevant and important to understand the things that are going around us, but two, makes it incredibly easy to collect data, and really good data, really valuable data, because of everything that's happening around us. But I don't have like a very specific interest in intergroup conflict per se. I mean, I'm just a person that's generally fascinated by any topic and just applying science to it. So right now, the topic I'm looking into is kind of intergroup conflict and trying to address it. I can give more specific details of what that means if you want. But I do want to give a fair warning that I am a scientist, so some of the topics I go into can touch into sensitive topics, and I'm going to try my best to not use triggering words, but just be aware that, I'm a scientist, and we try to discuss things in an objective manner. So if you disagree with the data, you can surely express your opinion, but just know that I'm saying just what I try my best to just talk about, objective data and objective conclusions. So I'm happy to go into it, but yeah, that's kind of, right now we're kind of addressing, also another area that we're addressing within science very specifically is kind of like mental health disparities between social groups. So what causes them, how are they caused, and what can we do to, ameliorate or improve the mental health disparities that there are in our societies. So that's just another area that we're trying to address in our lab, in our experiments, in our science, if you will. Which is kind of a cool segue. Like, if there are any follow-up questions, please go ahead and ask. But it is a good segue to talking about grad school, because it is very different from undergrad. Some people, I have met a lot of undergrads. I do have to teach undergrads myself from time to time as a graduate student. And I will say there are times where I meet undergrads that they never consider grad school as an option for them, because they feel like they would be miserable, because they're kind of miserable right now in college. Whereas I just personally think they would shine in grad school. I'm like, grad school sounds like it'd be ideal for like everything you mentioned that you like to do and study, and how you study and things like that. And I just kind of sometimes just kind of nudge them, be like, hey, have you ever given grad school a thought? Like, because grad school is kind of like this. It's not exactly like college. There are elements that are similar to college, but that's because it's education still. But there are vastly different elements of grad school compared to college as well. So research is one of them. If you are doing PhD track, if you're doing a completely different track, or you're interested in different tracks like PsyD or just other post-secondary education, then I don't have too much to talk about there. I'm gonna just talk about my experience and my kind of anecdotal evidence, my own life story, if you will, in grad school. Um, and so that is PhD track. So uh, thank you so much, Building Olympia. I appreciate the follow, and I appreciate that you joined us. So thanks for that, and thanks, yeah, thanks for sticking around. So anyway, um, and let me know if you want me to call you something else. I don't know if I should call you like Building Olympia, but yeah, appreciate it. Anyway, so grad school. So yeah, I've already been talking a little bit about research, and research is the like the hallmark of the difference between undergrad and grad. Unless in undergrad you're already kind of getting involved in research, then it'll be an easier transition if you're already involved in research as an undergrad. And if you're an undergrad and didn't know you could get involved in research, please feel free to ask me how. I will try to try to let you know as much as I can because it is such a valuable experience to get involved in research if you're interested in science and you're an undergrad. Um, Undergrad, if you're really unfamiliar, I'm sorry if there's listeners, I have no idea what that means. It means undergraduate student in university. Sometimes I use college as synonymous with university. It's kind of synonymous here in the US. So I understand that in other countries, other languages, college doesn't translate so well. So I apologize for that. Just understand when I say I went to college, or most of the time when I say college, it's referring to a 4-year university where you get a bachelor's degree. Um, if I like want to make distinctions between college and like per se a 2-year college, like a community college, I will explicitly say community college, which is not a bad option either. I'm not here to say college is the absolute best or university and everyone else is horrible. No, no, no. There are millions of paths you can take in life, and not one of them is the absolute best. I'm not here to say that. I'm just here to just share my experience with anyone that might want to hear or give their experience or have questions. So research is a hallmark that of the PhD program. Of course, you're there to do research. That's kind of the priority. You're told that, um, not you're told that explicitly sometimes, but it's kind of like the intuition or the thing you should intuit, if you will, in grad school, that research is priority. Yes, classes are really, really important. We're not saying it's less important, but let's just say let's just say your goal is to get 100 on like you're shooting to get 100. Doing research, or you're kind of weighing things on a scale of 1 to 100 on importance. Research is like 100, your classes are like 98. It's still super important. To me, it was equally important because how could I do good research if I'm not educated? But that's kind of like the tone that I felt, at least, that research, um, at the end of the day, was the most important. And doing research in itself is an education, if you will. You are learning, because that's the process. The research is the process of learning. You're trying to answer a question that someone doesn't know, that either you don't know or the general whole world doesn't know. But so therefore you are kind of doing the process of education by doing science. But that's kind of the what I had felt as first year going into graduate school and going through grad school, that research is like the priority. And then it's your classes, and then you also something that's so your classes are going to be somewhat similar to undergrad. Sometimes you might attend a lecture. It's going to be much smaller because there are way fewer grad students than there are undergrads. But for the most part, a lot of my classes, at least where I go to grad school, they're mostly like seminars, what you'd call like a seminar. So it's like, instead of just having a professor sit at the top of the room or at the front of the room, they sit at a table, like at a circular table, with everybody just kind of sitting in a circle, and you just kind of discuss things. They do a lot of the times have like lecture slides, kind of like a format. Like, okay, these are the things we're going to talk about. These are the kind of like learning objectives, if you will. But we're going to use empirical, firsthand science articles to inform ourselves, and no longer textbooks. So that's kind of the difference between college and grad school, is you're no longer really using textbooks, because textbooks kind of lays the foundation of the knowledge, and now you're in grad school, you're kind of beyond that. You're beyond the base foundation. That's kind of what undergrad was intended for, to give you a base foundation knowledge. So grad school, you just keep building on that base foundational knowledge. You will be exposed to a lot of what I call firsthand literature. What I mean by that is empirical articles, which means it's like science that has been peer reviewed, so other scientists have checked it, looked at the stats, done that, but there's like statistics to it, and it's published in kind of like a scientific journal, if you will. So that's kind of what we mean by empirical or firsthand scientific literature. So when you're trying to learn about, like, let's just say the topic is stigma, Um, in undergrad, you'll learn about kind of like what it means, how it's studied, things like that. Versus in grad, you might start learning um, like how it like new findings in or in stigma research, or how it's specifically applied in under certain contexts. So you'll learn all of the precise literature that relates to the topic that you're studying. So that's kind of what seminar is. It's you read papers, you show up to a classroom, and you just kind of discuss with fellow grads and the professor. Sometimes research ideas are made in these lecture class or in these seminars. That's kind of the intention as well, is that we learn from what's already done, and then we just start talking about, okay, what can we do with this knowledge? Can we do something? Can we add it to our own research? Can it augment our own research? And that's kind of the difference between college and grad school when it comes to some classes, is that there's kind of a goal as well. In addition to not just learning for learning's sake, there's also this subtle motivated goal to use the information that you're learning for your science or for your experiments or for whatever you're doing in your own research. Um, so that's kind of another difference. That the classes, although they kind of parallel college, the nature of them and the underlying goals of them are different. Again, in college, you're just showing that you're getting your base knowledge, and you can demonstrate that you have a grasp of the base foundational knowledge for whatever area you're studying. And in grad school is like, okay, we assume you have that base foundational knowledge. Now let's build on it. Okay, so the other portion of grad school that's vastly different from college, and if you've been to college, you will have encountered what's called a TA, a teacher's assistant. So as a grad student, a lot of the times, if you don't have your own funding or you just want the experience, you can become what's called a teacher's assistant. And this is the way we get paid as grad students. So I don't have to pay for graduate school. It's another myth that a lot of undergrads believe is grad school is even more expensive than college. Actually, it's not. It's a lot of PhD programs, especially like research track ones. I don't know. I can't speak on behalf of all PhD programs, but many PhD programs in the U.S., you actually get paid to do the PhD. You're on a stipend, provided a lot of them is like provided you're a TA or you have some sort of funding, like NSF, National Science Foundation, can fund you. Basically, but you're on a stipend, so you don't pay anything out of pocket, and you don't owe the school anything. In fact, the school pays for you to go to school. I don't I don't know all the intricacies there, but yeah. But basically, you're being paid to go to school, if you will, and part of getting paid is because you're a TA. So as an undergrad, the TAs are the the graduate students that either hang out in class or they lead a lab section. So you go to lab and there's no professor leading it. It's just like a graduate student that tries to explain things and just helps you out. And they hold office hours. If you're unfamiliar with office hours, that's just like a time every single week where the TA sits there or the professor, and any student from that class can come and ask any question they want. It's just to get extra help if you need it. So your TA holds office hours, and so we as TAs, I have to hold office hours, and that's kind of what this is right now. That's kind of the way I see it. I see it as office hours for the world. Anyone that wants to join, ask questions, talk about anything, I'm here. So yeah, so you have to hold office hours as a TA, but you also have to do grading. So you're assisting a professor, so you're doing a lot of the grading, and you're answering a lot of questions. Sometimes you have to lead a section. So this quarter that I'm currently in, I am leading a section, which means I have to teach like 25 students, and I'm currently teaching statistics. So I apologize if anyone hates statistics and I use examples of statistics or I refer to stats a lot. It's probably because it's fresh on my mind. Every day today I have to go over the lecture slides. Every day today. Every Tuesday I go over lecture slides because I teach on Thursdays. So yeah, that's kind of what a TA is. So that's very different from college again. As college, you're not really teaching. You can again volunteer to be a tutor and stuff like that, but you're not in charge of someone else's education anymore, which is kind of a stressor of grad school. You kind of have that realization whoa, they're listening to me. And I could outright lie, you would be caught and then reprimanded, of course. But that's what I'm saying. That's kind of you start to feel that burden, or at least I did. I felt that burden, which kind of at least makes me step up my game a little bit more to make sure that what I'm gonna say is correct and as factual as possible, and up to speed with current science and stuff like that. That's kind of what we strive for. So that's kind of TA-ship. So as a grad student in graduate school, you're kind of sitting there juggling Multiple things. You're putting on multiple hats. You're a researcher, so you're trying to just be this naturally curious person, having questions, making designs, doing things like that. And this is on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't really stop, which makes the job a little bit hard. It's kind of hard to stop it, and sometimes we pressure ourselves to do it a lot because we feel we're not doing enough. And then, so that's one hat. You're a researcher, and under that same hat, you put on like a sub hat of manager, because a lot of times when you're doing your research, you recruit like a team of what are called research assistants or RAs, and RAs are undergraduates that are seeking to get experience in research settings. So that's why I was saying you can join a lab, um, and so we just recruit motivated students or students that just want that experience, and then they kind of assist us in our experiments, whether it be like helping us design the experiment, run the experiment, analyze the data. It depends. It can depend on a lot of things. If anyone has questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it. I recruit RAs. I have my RAs and stuff that I can answer any questions if anyone's curious of how you become an RA and stuff like that. So that's kind of the sub hat that you put on as a manager. Is you have this team, and you kind of have to direct them, if you will. You can do everything yourself, but it does become efficient to have a team. That way you can do multiple projects at once. So you're not putting all your eggs in one basket at a time. You can split your time up into multiple research projects and push them all along. And you can have like a research team for one project pushing that one. You can have a different research team on a different project pushing that one. It depends on a lot of factors, of course, but that's just kind of what I'm saying. I'm trying to give how you can become a manager, if you will, as a researcher. So you're not only a researcher yourself, but you kind of have to manage the research as well. The other hat that you put on is like teacher, TA, and the other hat you put on is you're still a student. You're still learning, and you're still going to encounter failure. You're still going to encounter concepts that you don't understand, and you feel like you have to at this point. That as a grad student, how dare I not know this? But because the people we're comparing ourselves to is the people we work with, and a lot of time the people we work with are professors. Well, they have years on us. We have to remind ourselves of that. Like, oh my gosh, Rome was not built in a day. Already, my first Taco Tuesday was kind of on that notion of Rome wasn't built in a day type notion, and it's okay to not know things, and that you just got to keep practicing. And that's kind of going back to education again. Work out your brain, go to the gym, if you will. So grad school is no different. Like, we get imposter syndrome. We feel we don't belong. We feel stupid. We feel it, even though on the surface, if you've encountered a TA, they might look like they're really smart and they belong there. But a lot of the times inside, they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, my advisor is like leaps and bounds ahead of me. There's no way I could ever be that way. A lot of us are feeling that way too. Yeah, so I'm going to kind of cap it there. We're at an hour and 21 minutes. I'm going to kind of cap the grad school portion there. I've kind of described how different it is from college. And I'm happy to dive into detail of anything I've talked about. And I'm also just happy to answer any questions. But that's kind of what I had for today's Taco Tuesday. And now I'm just going to start leaving it more to open forum time. If anyone wants to talk about anything, yeah, I'm here to listen. Water break as well. And again, new playlist. My old playlist, somehow I was stopped from being able to use it all of a sudden. I have to like pay membership fees now. So I had to find an alternate solution. And I think I found it. So yeah, I apologize if sometimes I skip a track and it kind of disrupts the stream. I felt like it doesn't, but I apologize because I had to get this playlist like last minute. I went live and my other playlist just wasn't working when it was working just like a day ago or a couple days ago. I don't remember the last time I tested it, and all of a sudden didn't. So I had to find this quick solution. I think I'm gonna write a paper about the effects of martial arts and its many forms on the mind and body. What doesn't meet the eye? Yeah, that's a good idea. There's what is going? Wait, hold on. Can we just take a second to hear the song? Okay, cool. I'm jiving with it. All right. No, that's a really fascinating topic. You can approach it from kinesiology, right? like the study of muscles and the movement of the muscles. You can study sports psychology, so how the mind interacts with doing a sport. You can take it from a neuroscientific approach and the neurotransmitters released and absorbed during martial arts and practicing martial arts and learning about the martial arts, because learning and practicing it are also two different things, right? Like there's a history to it. There's like almost like a culture to it, like a whole universe to it. Just like as there is for a plethora of topics. Many topics we might feel we start to understand it really quick, and then you quickly realize, holy cow, there's a whole depth to this that I didn't even perceive at the beginning. That's what you can refer to as layman's terms, like the Dunning-Kruger effect. With, as we start to learn about something, we approach this peak of ignorance, and then we drop down to the valley of like reality or whatever, and then we start to slowly incline linearly towards more being a master or a guru of the topic, but in a rightful sense, instead of perceiving that we know everything when we actually don't. Interesting song. It's like very. Let's turn it up. I like it. I like the rhythm. It's like joyful. Yeah. Removing stigmas is quite hard. Like that's one of my research. One of my lines of research is looking at stigma and how do you go about removing stigma? It's quite tough. It's one solution is education. Education cure a lot of ignorance. Literally is the cure to ignorance. I think it's literally the opposite definition, right? Ignorant is not knowing, right? And education is learning to know, or learning the knowledge. So, but how do you spread the message more effectively for people to connect with? That's the tough part. And removing stigmas is quite tough. Yeah. Obviously, I study stigmas under a social identity context, and we use different social groups. Of course, being in karate is a social group that can be studied using social psychology as well. So you can just use social psychology to answer a lot of the questions. You don't. That's the beauty of science, is you can take so many different disciplines and answer this one question, right? But you can take so many different paths, and I'm not here to say that mine is the best way or mine's the correct way, or that any one way is the best way or the correct way. I personally believe. One second, I'm gonna sneeze. Okay, excuse me. Excuse me. Okay. I do like being very interdisciplinary. I do believe that the more kind of diversity I have in my scientific approach, the bigger picture I can get, the more full picture I can get of whatever situation I'm trying to understand before me, whatever experiment, whatever paradigm, if you will, that I'm trying to understand, the more disciplines or the more science, the more different types of science. So again, like for example, let's put in my example, I use psychology, social psychology, cognitive psychology, but I also use neuroscience and biology. I can try to incorporate some chemistry, some neurochemistry into it. The more of those methodologies that I use, this is kind of what I believe when I'm trying to do, the better picture I can get on, let's say, the brain, trying to understand the brain. I can understand it from many different angles. And that's what I love about science, is like you can apply it in many different ways. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're not. That's not the only industry that is fighting the good fight, if you will. Anything that can attract people, you're gonna have competition, right? Like universities have competition for education. There's a lot of institutions that offer false educations, and they give you false notions, right, for a quick buck. Um, so it's a fight, but I mean, I guess it's a great segue to kind of plug the purpose of the channel. Sorry, like I don't like self promos, but if it's in the name of science, I'm gonna do a promo for science. That's kind of the purpose. One of my motivations for this channel is to be like, all right, there's a lot of competition out there for our attention, whether it's on virtual space or our actual 3D space. A lot of things compete for our attention. Some of it. And some of it derails us from a lot of good things or a lot of our goals. And yeah, fraudulent schools, whether it be in martial arts or in education, that can be something that derails that massively. And so, just trying to debunk myths about grad school or college, or just trying to talk about it online. I'm trying to provide a space that competes with those fraudulent places. Like let's try to bolster, um, things that we believe to be good as, let's try to bolster the defenses, if you will. Yeah, but movies and TV and everything. Guess how that makes psychologists and social psychologists and scientists feel? It's the worst. A lot of movies are just like, oh my god, that's pop psychology. Like that's not actual science, or like that's not how it works. So this is studied and actually in stigmas and stereotyping and prejudice and racism. How does it persist in our societies, even though we can educate the general population as to like, oh yeah, we're not actually all that super different. A lot of our DNA is like 99% the same. Like, so we're all kind of citizens of the world. We shouldn't be racist. And although we can all acknowledge it, right? Why does it persist? And one of the things is one of the notions here that can kind of partially explain why it continues to persist. There's many explanations, right? This is a very complex, multi-layered issue. There's many explanations, and one of the explanations is just what's called like perpetuating myths through movies and through media, right? Perpetuating a myth. So this is kind of that movement. And again, I'm not here to argue whether movement is good or bad or push agendas here. I'm just illustrating as a scientist with an objective. I'm trying to provide an objective standpoint here. This is kind of why we saw in our society this push towards, more inclusion, more representation, more people of certain backgrounds in movies, in certain roles, just so we could stop perpetuating the myth, right? There's like, I've seen this meme of this actor named Hector, and he always plays the same guy in every single movie, so that can perpetuate the myth that either people named Hector are always in these like thug positions, or that the like a Latino that looks like Hector is that's all they're capable of. And again, we can consciously say, well, like, I'm not going to make those associations. I can differ between reality and fiction, right? And a lot of us can, and that's fair. I'm not here to say, like, shut down everything. We need to be entirely 100% politically correct. No, a lot of people can handle it and still be, making rational decisions or making more rational, like form more rational attitudes and beliefs. And to that, I say I'm going to argue that the people probably more likely to do that probably correlates highly with how educated you are. So another plug for education. But man, now I lost my train of thought with that little plug. Dang it! I saw the opportunity, took it, and now lost my train of thought. But yeah, oh yeah, the whole push towards more inclusion and diversity and stuff like that. But yeah, so basically, like, if you think about the brain and how it learns, and it's kind of like it also likes to detect patterns. It's a great pattern detecting machine, your brain. And so that's just an implicit pattern that the brain might start to pick up. This is kind of in defense of saying why it's kind of like important to not constantly show a negative stereotype over and over again, because what you're doing is you're kind of showing the brain a lot of evidence that is true. And so people start to develop this notion that stereotypes are based on absolute truth and start to generalize entire populations based on a misconception, right? Some stereotypes are people. I see this all the time on social media. Stereotypes are based on some truth, or they come from something, right? Some of them are based on a complete lie and complete manipulation with a hidden agenda, right? We can go into it, but some of them we don't have. That's not the purpose of today's kind of what we're talking about. But some stereotypes are completely made up because there was an agenda behind them. So that's kind of the 2 cents from the neuroscientific perspective of like kind of reasons to push on social media to show certain things or stop showing certain things. And now I'm not going to say absolute censorship and we need to take complete reign. I'm not here to say that either. I'm just providing kind of information like how the brain reacts to certain contexts or certain stimuli. And then, I mean, there's a lot of research that also goes hand in hand with this, which makes me more confident what I'm saying is not absolutely wrong, such as like illusory correlation is another notion that's been studied a lot. And if you're unfamiliar with illusory correlation, I did already do a segment on it, talked about illusory correlation, but if you're unfamiliar with that term, it's just this notion of building correlations or seeing a relationship between two variables that actually doesn't exist. One instance of an illusory correlation is that flying in airplanes is extremely dangerous. because all you see on the news is failed plane crashes, but you don't see in the news all the successful plane landings, which heavily outweigh how many planes have crashed. There's way more successful plane flights a day than there are plane crashes in a year. So people can form these phobias or fears of flying because they're seeing what their mind actually sees. The evidence that they're gathering from the news is just crashes. And there's other cognitive heuristics at play as well, like the recency effect and other things like that. But because non-events are not reported, because they're not newsworthy, your brain has no data to compare to. The only data it's given is the data that it sees on the news, and that's just crash, 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 crash. So you form an illusory correlation. You think that there's a strong correlation between flying and dying, when in reality, there's a lot of data that says the probability of dying in a plane crash is less than getting like the probability of you being struck by lightning. So that's kind of the illusory correlation. So social media can also be a platform on which illusory correlations can be formed, unfortunately. It's something to be aware about. And so I talked about illusory correlation in previous segments. If it really interests you, you can hear it, or we can talk about it now. Do you think that because of that, the news should be regulated in some way? That is such a, oh my God, I've been like wrestling with this question because one of my research, one of my lines of research actually does test whether reporting news in a specific way can stigmatize people, leading to kind of mental health issues. And I'm talking also on a physiological sense. We're not just measuring people's emotions. People think that sometimes social psychologists or psychologists, we just sit there on couches trying to understand people's emotions and dreams. That couldn't be further from the truth. So yeah, we've actually began to try to tackle that. Right now, a lot of our research is inconclusive as to the reporting style and stuff like that. But just to kind of get at the question here, I think the regulation that can be implemented that I think would be fair would be being able to regulate a news's power over how much they twist or distort statistics, first of all, to sell a story, or how much they distort the severity of stories to push sales again. I'm not sure I'm familiar with Q, like QAnon. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, but yeah, like I feel, but again, I'm not entirely sure. I don't have very strong feelings towards one way or another, but just from like an intuitive sense, based on, okay, yeah, QAnon, cool. Yeah, just like based on my experience with how social psychology can be used to either manipulate the masses or get masses to do something, whether it's buy your product over other people's products, but using the science like that, where I think news, I don't want to say should be regulated. I don't know. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not an economist either. I'm not a sociologist either, so I don't have all the answers. But I think just from my scientific standpoint, I think the degree to which a news station can distort statistics, I think should be regulated, because news media, as opposed to any channel, right? I'm not advocating for regulations on any channel. If you're a comedy show, or if you're a fan of Family Guy, they can say whatever they want, right? They can totally oppose education. I'm not going to say anything against them. Like, that's just a comedy show, and that's their right, if you will. But the news is to me is seen as like a bastion or a beacon of truth. And if that's the way society is going to see it, and if the news sources are aware of this, which I think they are aware, that people look to them for information and actual evidence or actual information regarding our real world, and I think news sources are aware of this, I think it's a responsibility on them to not manipulate to get more viewership. But I don't know how you go about making sure they're not manipulating. And when I say manipulating statistics, I can give you an example if you're kind of unclear with that as an example. So an example from like teaching statistics that a lot of stats books like to give is kind of the way you can represent or present the U.S. salary or how well off citizens in the U.S. are to other people that are unfamiliar with the U.S. Income and stuff like that. So if I was a news station and I wanted to present the US in a really positive light, what I might present to people that aren't familiar with US salaries is the mean, the average. What is the average salary in the US? And that's going to distort the truth because what's going to happen with the data set that I have is we have people in the US like Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, Jeff Bezos, people who are billionaires, just they're absurdly rich. That pulls the salary, the average salary, way up beyond what the actual average American makes. So the mean, which is a statistic, and it's not a wrong, I didn't do my math wrong, is going to look really high. So if I wanted to show to like, let's just say like a, I don't know, someone from a different continent, just be like, look, here's the mean. Here's all the data. I can show you all the data, all my math. It's all going to check out. And that's the mean. Our mean, let's just say, is because of all the billionaires, gets pulled up to 300K a year. Does the average American make 300K a year? No. But the mean, that's what it's saying. The average American makes 300K a year. So I can present that to someone that doesn't know very well about statistics and how I can use different stats to present a story that I want. Because then, if I wanted to reflect a more accurate representation, if I wanted people to understand a more accurate representation of what the average American makes, then I might want to show the median. So the median is going to be that centermost value. So what does the centermost value, what does it indicate? So if you were to grab everyone's salary in the US and just kind of start eliminating, get to the very center value, that's your median. So that might reflect a way more accurate story or reality of the US than the mean might. So that's just a way a news or anyone can use statistics you're not violating any math rules, but use statistics to promote an agenda. Yeah, I mean, oh my God, I am so with you there. I am totally for, and in case someone can't read it, so the comment was, I feel like removing the financial barrier to institutional education is something that can address that. I totally agree. Like I was just saying, like, in college, a lot of different degrees teach you statistics, and if you understand this notion, then you won't fall prey to when any entities trying to manipulate you using statistics. Because again, their math checks out. They can do the math in front of you, and you're going to believe. You're like, yeah, that's true. That is the mean. That's not wrong. So if I move to the U.S., I'm going to be in 300K a year. That's the average. And remember, we do have a bias, the better than average effect, or we fall victim to the better than average effect because we have like something called like a self-enhancing bias, the tendency to see ourselves positively. So, and we tend to think of ourselves, we tend to like to think of ourselves as better than average. So now imagine how much like people can be influenced by news stories just by simple manipulation of the statistics. If you're educated in statistics, and not everyone has to be, that's where I'm saying some responsibility needs to fall on the news stations, because if they're doing this knowingly, promoting false realities, using statistics, I think that is something that has to have some sort of level of regulation. Um, don't know how you implement it. Of course, it'd probably call for more taxes because you probably need some statistician to come and be able to explain things and teach and make sure everything's being done diligently and all of that. So again, I'm not an economist, so I don't have solutions. But that's just like that's just from a scientific standpoint. That's a point, or like an area that I feel news stations kind of can abuse of their power. But I totally agree. If we can remove barriers to education, I totally agree that a lot of issues, and this is of my own personal opinion. I don't have the science to back this what I'm about to say. I don't have the evidence to back it up. I have a lot of correlational, or I don't want to say a lot. I have correlational evidence and studies that I've read. I haven't performed myself that supports a lot of notions that I'm about to say, but I don't have. This is of my own personal opinion. I just want to make that clear right now. So yeah, I do think that if education were free and that just anyone could access it, a lot of issues that we're trying to tackle now would solve themselves. I I think that. I believe that if people can get, if you kind of take the approach of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with the most basic needs being like, you need to be eating, sleeping, or having a shelter, like you need food, water, and shelter, and then you can move on to next goals. So our goals become more abstract the further up we get in this hierarchy of happiness. So our first goals are survive now, 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 now. So if anyone who's trying to survive in the now, there's no way they can think about their future 10 years from now. Their brain is just locked into the now. Just so we can understand a little bit more context of what I'm going to of the idea like that education can kind of make it so like maybe a lot of crime can be, I believe education can solve a lot of crime issues, not all of them, but I think crime would go drastically down if education were free. or if a lot of the barriers, not just free, but if a lot of barriers to education were removed, I think a lot of crime could go down. And in a sense, I just have that feeling just from studying evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, cognitive psychology, social psychology, and all those sciences, put them together to kind of get this sense of like, I just feel that as our needs get met, the less likely we are to need to do something to meet those needs, such as break in, steal food, things like that, steal from my neighbor. Um, the more I learn about myself, the more educated I am in a sense as well. Like the more comfortable I am with myself, possibly. I'm not saying this applies 100% of the time to 100% of people, but I'm saying is it kind of helps us reach in the hierarchy of needs, the self-actualization. And once you kind of self-actualize, you find the people who are self-actualized or have higher self-esteem, they don't talk so negatively about things. They don't talk about negative about those around them. And so again, aggression rates would go down, meaning probably fewer fights, less crime rate again. Again, this is all extrapolation. I'm not saying I have evidence of this, but I do have a lot of studies that show, for example, I remember reading a paper that they did a lot of studies in 10 countries in Europe looking at education and how it correlates to open-mindedness and whether like you view immigrants as threatening or not. And what they found is that for every year you were educated, starting from just like even elementary school, for every year added on, you're kind of like 10% more open-minded, if you will, and you feel less threatened. People who feel less threatened are less likely to react in more irrational ways, right? So less violent ways because you can use more rational thought. Your violent aggressions, things like that, those are more automatic, more like animalistic instincts and impulses. And I'm not saying those are invalid. I'm just saying they can be cued under certain contexts, and usually they're cued under contexts where you're not satisfying some basic needs, like you're starving to death. So of course you're gonna try to eat. Um, so I'm just saying, like, what I'm trying to just say with all of this is that, yeah, in those countries, they just found that the more educated you were, the less threatened you were by immigrants, and the more open-minded you were, the more receptive you were to immigrants, and the more you saw the benefit of being able to integrate different components or different perspectives to make like a better conclusion of whatever you're trying to conclude. Yeah, so I have a lot of a lot of a lot that we can talk about in terms of I love education and learning. I mean, that's the whole purpose of today's Taco Tuesday, so I can talk about this forever. But that's kind of my summarized 2 cents of your comment there. I hope I'm not just going like crazy too, like on tangents. Ooh, I'm running out of water. Give it a couple more seconds. Just let it see if anyone wants to chime in with anything. I think I'm gonna take a quick bathroom break. I do need to use the restroom really fast, so I'll give that as like the minute or 2 minute little break. I will be right back, everybody. I'm gonna go use the restroom, and yeah, I'll be back in a couple minutes.
so distant when you're home, always hanging by your phone. Do I even know you? And I get paranoid sometimes, 'cause I know that you ain't mine, and I'm lost without you. Used to be the one I talk to when I'm sad. Can't you see now tainted love is all we had? Our issues run so deep, now when I try to sleep I feel so bad. I should leave, and by the time it's done I'll be gone.
All right, I'm back. This has been a great Taco Tuesday. I want to thank SPS and Building thus far for joining in and chatting. I just want to say I appreciate it for joining me today. And quick heads up that yeah, any previous Taco Tuesday and Science Friday for the most part is on my YouTube. So if you ever were interested, if I've mentioned like, oh, I talked about illusory correlation, yeah, that's on YouTube if that ever interested you. But I'm always happy to just talk about it here, especially if and this goes to anybody, if you heard like a Taco Tuesday or Science Friday and want to bring that topic back up or want another Taco Tuesday or Science Friday on that topic, I am so happy to do it. The point here is for us to chat about anything we want. Right now, I'm just choosing topics because, for the most part, I start talking to the void, so I need a topic to talk about. Whew. Burning through water. I keep saying burning through water. I'm drinking through water very fast. So you can't really burn water. Oh my goodness. It's been a great Tuesday. Still have some more work to do in my dissertation this evening. I'm not quite done for the day working, but I love Taco Tuesdays. They're like a nice day to sit there and chat. So I hope everyone else's Tuesday is going great. SPS and Building Olympia, I still don't know what to call you. I'm sorry if you have a completely different name. I hope your Tuesday is going awesome. And yeah, let me know if you want to, or if you haven't, yeah, anyone, if you have any other questions for a graduate student, anything. But yeah. Not necessarily. I'm just kind of like chilling now. I've kind of gone over everything I wanted to go over, if you will. I don't really have. I mean, I have millions of thoughts. I can just keep talking, but I also don't want to just drone on. I just want to have a space for open forums so we can talk about anything. Doesn't have to be education. But if it is the case that like we don't really have any more thoughts or anything like that, no one wants to chime in anymore, then I'm probably going to cap it at the second hour, just so the YouTube video isn't extremely long. But I don't mind continuing, like just continuing staying here. I don't mind that. Is it Shark? Hold on, I'm going to try something. Shark P5 GG. Yeah, still works. That's funny. It's a little. So when this channel became affiliate, so alongside those ads, unfortunately. I'm very sorry about those. I had to make badges and stuff and emotes, and I couldn't come up. I don't know. I'm not like a huge emote person, so that's kind of like what I could come up with on the spot, because I needed to do it fast apparently. So that's what I came up with, a little GG with 2 electrons floating around it. So helium GG. Electrons. My OChem professor once said, everything is in the energy of the electrons. And man, what a guy. What a professor. What a class. Such an amazing class. I miss OChem. I miss it and I don't miss some of the days. All the late nights studying. All the lack of sleep. I don't miss that, but I miss the working with the topic, working with the subject. I'll get back to it one day. That's my plan, to incorporate it in my research one day. But little by little, we'll get there. We will get there. So, so building, are you in university, graduated, grad school graduated? And okay, of course you don't have to answer any of this if you don't want to. I'm just curious as to who's like interested in Taco Tuesdays and the topic, since you mentioned at the beginning. Curious who I'm talking to. As a social psychologist, I'm always interested in yeah, in a lot of variables and a lot of factors. But again, I don't want to put you on the spot. I can put SPS on the spot. He's a recurring. He's my younger brother, so I can put him on the spot. I don't even know of those. You're a high school dropout. Okay, that's not bad. I'm not here to cast judgment. In case you were saying that like with like I just want to make sure that anyone in a talk with during any time of in my channels or stream, I'm not here to like judge or anything, but okay, that's good to know. I was just curious, just backgrounds of people that are interested in talking about this, like where people are coming from and stuff like that. So yeah, I've never considered it because I've never heard of it or didn't know they existed. Oh, that's cool. But do you have to like apply or? I would go on. I'm happy to talk about it. Of course, if it's civil discourse, like if I'm gonna join a chat and people are just trolling around, like well, the moment they don't like a data point or something and they just start insulting, then I'm just like, all right, well, there's no longer a civil discussion, and I don't wanna use up my time like that. But somebody apply some of our open panels. Cool. I'm gonna look into that. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to look into that. I'd love to participate in some panels if they're, yeah. I mean, I'm sure it can get heated. Like, I'm passionate about certain things, and like especially when I've encountered trolls on the internet now. Like, I don't. Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, I can look into it. I'm open to suggestions. But I encountered on social media, but it was just like via text, so it wasn't live or anything. But yeah, when people really diss on science and education without ever even knowing a little hint of it, you're just like, man, other people could be reading this and get influenced by it and fall into it. Like, yikes. So that can strike home. But like people attack me all the time and I don't care. Like I just ignore them because what's the point if they attack me? I've been attacked a lot on social media. Just trying to defend science and education. And learning. And again, I just want to keep stressing, when I say education, I don't mean college. I'm not here to say college is the way. I'm just saying learning and becoming informed as people and making rational decisions and maybe apply a scientific method every once in a while in your life. It's great. Let's see. It's a leftist podcast. Interesting. Streaming about leftist politics and anything else really. Okay, cool. This would be interesting. Maybe this can be also another step I can take to reaching. Yeah, this is awesome. I like it because basically, one of my goals is to try to like discuss and chat about a lot of the science. Yeah, yeah. I'm seeing, I'm watching it right now. Like I have it on mute, of course, but like I can see the chat and like people kind of talking there. Um, this is fascinating. Thank you so much for this tip. Basically, I've been trying to find ways that like I can further boost like people becoming aware that social psych, or not social psych in general, but just science has a lot of answers or has a lot of explanations to a lot of questions people currently have. Cool. Thank you for thanks for that compliment first of all, and super thanks for the tip. This or the reference. This is awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into these and probably start joining some of the panels if they accept me. This is so cool. Yeah, I've just been wanting. I kind of wanted to create something similar. I do have sometimes graduate students join my channel, so I've had guests on this channel before, and they talk about their science and stuff like that. So sometimes I do like a grad panel, and basically this is kind of what I'm trying to build in a sense, a little bit different, right? Not just complete discourse. Like sometimes it's more navigated, the discussions, but yeah, just chatting with people about like things that science can do, like if you have questions, or defending science too. A lot of people hate on science or education, so also just trying to say like, hey, if you have like all this hatred towards science, I want to hear them out. Can I hear them, and then we can just talk about it. Of course, I know that it's gonna be impossible to attract haters. Like, why would they even come to my channel if they hate the topic to begin with? That's not how it works. We tend to abide by like kind of confirmation bias. We seek things that we already know, and we kind of confirm. We use new evidence to try to confirm things we already believed in knew. So it's kind of called the confirmation bias. So I understand that that's going to prevent those people, but it's just like that's kind of a minor goal of this channel. But this is so cool. Thank you so much. I'm gonna see. I like on social media. So I sometimes go to 9gag for fun for memes, and there I was like invited to some community panels because there are people arguing about neurons and how it works in the hippocampus. And I did study stress and memory in the hippocampus for some part of my degree and my research. So like they were just asking me to chime in. So I'm like, yeah, sure. Like I'll try to provide whatever knowledge I can and however I can. So this is so cool. I have to keep an eye out for multiple, or like several of these, and see if I can join them. Right now they're discussing politics. I rarely get into politics because I just personally love discussing things that can be less polarizing in the sense that they're more objective. Not that everything's absolutely objective. Again, I will say that even as a scientist, we are capable of of having biases and capable of misinterpreting our data with like being biased, right? That is capable. That is possible. Scientists aren't perfect beings either. Some of them have bad agendas, but that's kind of the case for any group of people. You're gonna have your saints and you're gonna have your devils. If biology's taught me anything, is that we have like distributions of different types of genes. So distributions, and probabilities. But yeah, I'll try to find like if people are discussing like social issues, I'm happy to talk about because like a lot of my science, is like I did a study on, and I replicated this one. So this has been replicated so many times. So now there's a lot of evidence on this of what's called the shooter bias. So I did a study on what's called the shooter task. And it's just a task design where like you're supposed to shoot targets, and you show up to the lab and you play this first-person shooter game, if you will, and your job is to shoot anyone holding a weapon, and not shoot someone who is not holding a weapon. So they might have a cell phone or a wallet in their hand, and basically, yeah, that's your job. And so you're informed like you're if you don't shoot someone that does have a weapon, you're gonna get shot. And so that's like minus 100 points. If you shoot a correct target, so if you shoot someone that you should have shot, you get like X amount of points. And if you don't shoot someone that you should not have shot, then you get Y number of points. I forget how much. But basically, you're sitting there. And what this game really is, it's like a signal detection task. Like you're starting to build a relationship, or you're trying to get really fast at pulling the trigger when you should, and not pulling the trigger when you shouldn't. And in a sense, that's kind of what police need to be trained on, right? They need to be trained on a lot of different parameters regarding when to use lethal force or not. And so what these studies showed, and this was done, the seminal work was done by Joshua Carell at, I want to say, at the University of Colorado, and Carell et al. I think Park, Judd, and I think there's one other scientist. Maybe it's just them, Carell, Park, and Judd. 2002 or 2005 is the citation. I'll put that here. Actually, I can probably quickly find it on Google Scholar. If anyone's listening wants to try to follow along with whatever you can find. Let me see. It's called The Police Officer's Dilemma. The Police Officer Dilemma. Joshua Carell, very famous paper in this topic. And basically this topic is just dealing with, does there exist a bias for shooting certain targets over others? And those targets that we're going to talk about, or that this study goes into, is black. So whether you're a black civilian or a white civilian, or a white target, if you will. And when we use the word target, we don't, and it's an unfortunate coincidence that in cognitive psychology, target refers to the stimulus you're perceiving, so the target of your attention, but it also, unfortunately, for weapons and stuff, target is the thing you shoot at. So it's an unfortunate coincidence, but I don't mean it in that way. So yeah, it is that. Wow, my memory kicked in. Cool. It is Park, Judd, and Carell. Oh, and there was one more. Burned, 2002. I'm gonna put that citation into the chat, so it's there. So this is what I'm talking about. So I replicated this study and found the same evidence. So there is evidence that there seems to be a shooter bias, meaning the black targets are shot way more frequently. There's way more errors on them, and it's significant, statistically significant. So the difference in the rates in which errors are being committed, that difference is significant enough for us to care about it. That's what that kind of means when we say significant difference. We should pay attention to it. And what was kind of shocking about these studies was that most participants exhibit most backgrounds, like of the backgrounds that were tested. So whether you yourself belong to, like you're white or you come from a black background or anything like that, that regardless of your background, you kind of exhibited this pattern, kind of starting to insinuate or hint or suggest, these data were suggesting kind of that there could be a cultural issue of stereotype, and the stereotype, or this implicit association, if you will, between black and violent. And so we kind of are more aggressive towards black people, if you will, black civilians. In this context here, I'm not saying in every single context. This research speaks to these specific contexts alone. So I'm not trying to tell people, run wild with this evidence and this information. Again, this is sensitive information, but we're discussing it as scientists. And I understand that not everyone's a scientist, but that's why I am here to talk about it and try to talk about it in a more lay terms while still staying true to the science. So again, this isn't like across any situation, like, oh, in the mall, we're going to be more aggressive towards X person or Y person. No. This is in this situation. And I ran a study that replicated these things. So I've done it firsthand. I've seen it with my own eyes. And so, yeah, and I'm not the only one that replicated these findings. A lot of labs have replicated these findings. So that just starts to speak to that, there's the probability that we all bias this, independent of knowing that we were all doing the study, is extremely low. So that to me is starting to say that there's something happening here. If 10 different papers, 10 different labs that didn't even communicate found the same findings, right, that there seems to be this bias. And when I say bias, I did have a segment on implicit bias, what it is and how it's measured. That's on YouTube as well. But when I say bias, I don't mean that in a negative sense. We're all biased with a lot of things, right? If I go to the store and I'm buying ice cream and I decide I want to buy chocolate because I like chocolate over vanilla ice cream, I have a bias. I'm biased towards chocolate ice cream, because if I wasn't biased, then I should exhibit a behavior where I have a normal distribution of ice cream colors or ice cream flavors between the two, or like I average the same, right? It's just randomly chosen. Oh, vanilla this time, chocolate this time, chocolate this time, chocolate this time, vanilla again, chocolate, vanilla, chocolate, whatever. But it's random, if you will. So bias is just you're behaving in a way that is more leaning towards one side, skewed. There we go. That's what I was looking for. You're skewed. So that's what I mean by bias. So there seems to be a skewed behavior in all of our experiments that we've run. In terms of, when I say we, as a scientific community. So anyone that's run the shooter task, of the articles I've read and stuff like that, they have the same trend. Whew. Love science. Wittenbrink. Yeah, Wittenbrink. I can't believe I messed that one up. Burned Wittenbrink. Yikes. I could even post the abstract of this paper. Let's see how. I wonder if it'll consume the entire chat box. The abstract's not that long with this paper. And if you're unfamiliar with the term abstract, an abstract of a paper is like the summary of the entire paper. So like the first sentence or maybe sometimes two sentences is kind of like the introduction. So a scientific paper, if you're super unfamiliar with empirical articles, they're structured in a very standardized way. The first portion is called your introduction, kind of introduces the topic and what's known about it. The second portion is called the method. So how did they do their experiment, the design of it, what they did, what they measured. The third portion is the results, what they found. And then the fourth portion is the discussion of those results back. So it kind of follows an hourglass format. So we start really broad. Okay, like this is why I'm interested in this. And this is how I did it. And this is what I found. And this is how it applies to the world. So the abstract summarizes the hourglass in like a paragraph. So the first couple sentences is intro, the next couple of sentences is a method, how did they do it, the next sentences are results, what did they find, and the last sentences are kind of like the conclusions, if you will. So let's see how long it is. I'm going to post it in here. Yeah, it reached the limit. So using a simple video game, the effect of ethnicity on shoot, don't shoot decisions was examined. African American or white targets holding guns or other objects appeared in complex backgrounds. When I say complex backgrounds, it's like instead of putting like a black backdrop or white backdrop or green or anything, it's like it actually is an environment. Like there's fountains, like there's like cities behind them, houses, whatever. So it matches what if you remember I was talking about ecological validity, that was done for ecologically valid reasons. Participants were told to shoot armed targets and not to shoot unarmed targets. So again, I already kind of described that. In study one, participants made the correct decision to shoot an armed target more quickly if the target was African American than if he was white, but decided to not shoot an unarmed target more quickly if he was white. And then that cut off there. Let me see where it cut off. Okay, so we're on study 2 is where it cut off. Here's the rest of it. So study 2 used a shorter time window, so it forced more error. There's a reason why you want to force error when you're trying to study bias, because bias emerges when you have to kind of rely more on your instincts. Your bias can emerge and we can measure it objectively speaking. So study 2 used a shorter time window, forcing this effect into error rates. Study 3 replicated study 1's effects and showed that the magnitude of bias varied with perceptions of cultural stereotypes. So the more you believe in stereotypes and the more you adhere to it, the more you follow this pattern, if you will. Of African Americans are dangerous. Again, I already just kind of described how the news can kind of lead to that notion, if you will. And with levels of contact. So study 4 revealed equivalent levels of bias among white and African participants in community samples. So again, even people from their own in-group exhibit this. So even African Americans that participated in this study also shot at their African Americans much faster. So they also exhibited similar biases. So kind of speaking to a general, more like a cultural issue or cultural like a broader issue. And it's not just an interracial thing. It's not just white people doing this or X people or Y people, but it seems to be anyone that there's something about kind of being American, if you will. Because again, this sample was taken from an American population, so we cannot generalize this to the world. We can only derive things that our experiment allows us to derive. And we did not take, the studies and my studies did not take samples from different countries. We can only speak on behalf of our sample size and who they generalize to. And then, so of course, they end it with implications of potential underlying mechanisms are discussed. So they discuss all of that. So that's kind of the shooter task, and I brought that up because we were kind of talking about, like, I don't really get into politics much, I don't do that, but there are social issues that we study like very in depth. And for example, here's a big social issue with the whole right now movements and the whole division of our society right now between like the people that perceive that defund the police means get rid of them completely, and the people that are saying defund the police and stuff like that. There seems to be the perception that they're enemies. Defund the police means something completely different than what the layperson thinks it means. I actually attended a lecture from a social psychologist that's working with policymakers like senators, and he goes to Washington D.C. to be like an informed expert to help with policy and law change and stuff like that in regards to policing. And like, yeah, he did a brilliant way of kind of defining defund the police, and kind of also mentioned like the people labeling that kind of dropped the ball, like it was totally misconstrued. um, but yeah, so that just I brought in Carell's paper because it's a big seminal paper in this sense, and kind of trying to illuminate or highlight how these studies, in an objective sense, can illuminate social issues that we're currently experiencing. And so I'm happy to talk about those because, like, I'm involved in these sciences. So the purpose of this channel is, if you have questions or want to chat about it and want to get a scientist's perspective on social issues as well, I'm happy to chat. And again, this is just the abstract, what I posted in chat. Ooh. Am I aware of the Camden police reform? No, I'm not. And Camden, so are you talking about like Camden in London? I've been there. So I don't know of any other Camden. Camden. Like in the UK? New Jersey. No, I haven't. I haven't heard of it. So I haven't actually dealt with police studies in a while. Last time I did a study, well, when I say while, relatively speaking, 2 years ago, a year ago. So I haven't been involved in that literature since then. But right now I'm involved in attribution, what's called attribution literature and cognitive psychology. It's heavy theory based because basically, long story short, COVID shut down our universities and our labs and stuff, so I can't do fMRIs, EEGs, can't bring in participants into the lab to use our lab computers where we have like software to, like we use Python sometimes to like make an experiment, like a virtual experiment, so to speak, but we need the computers to do that. So all that's shut down, and I don't have access to that. But yet, my dissertation has to press forward, so I had to adapt a lot and change a lot of my dissertation to be able to be done online, all online, which has its positives and negatives. But yeah, I haven't heard of it. I haven't heard of it. Okay, I'm gonna have to read up on this. This is yeah, this is multi-layered. I just pulled up a quick article, but these again, when it comes to certain issues, especially if I don't know about it, I like to address multiple sources, as a scientist should, right? Um, and try to get my sources from varying sides of the issue. So not just one side leaning, to try to avoid confirmation bias and those types of things. Again, knowing these things can provide the tools for me to avoid coming to a biased and incorrect conclusion, if you will, and aid me in trying to come up to a more accurate representation of reality. Um, yeah, I'm gonna read about this. This is very interesting, and it might actually relate to my current dissertation. We'll see. Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna have to educate myself a little bit more in that situation. Yeah. What's interesting is conversations that I've either just sat in or been part of, or just, like I said, witnessed, so sat in, is this conversation of like drawing parallels between other countries and the US. And it seems like a lot of countries put in place that you need to have a bachelor's degree to become a police officer. I don't know to what degree that actually would benefit the U.S. or not, but I mean, to me, it seems reasonable. That's kind of without knowing too much of the Camden thing and the whole situation there. I don't know if that. So well, the reason I brought that up is because the guy that came in and gave a talk and was talking about defund the police, that term and stuff like that. Um, he was trying to, I think what he was trying to say, because I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the idea that I got was that in reality, what we should try to do is restructure the way we're funding the police, restructure it in terms of instead of just continuously giving them more bullets and more arsenal, arm them like in their heads, right? Educate them more, get them better training, get them like better things instead of just arming them to the teeth and giving them like even rocket launchers or stuff like that. Instead of funding that, let's fund education and like the sources by which we can create like better police officers, if you will. That's kind of the way I understood it of defund the police and yeah, I think that label was not the greatest because it's gonna be misconstrued crazy. But yeah, he was at least trying to confirm that it doesn't mean get rid of police altogether, but like basically restructure the way the funding is going. Um, yeah, it was an interesting talk. And yeah, he went over a lot of like different studies done on like police trainings and how to decrease bias and increase like more accurate um, decisions. I had a actually, yeah, I talked about it in I think a Science Friday. I think it was the first Science Friday. I talked about that research and implicit bias and how it's measured and stuff like that. So anyone interested in that and listening to this right now, YouTube has it. My YouTube, in my about, there's a YouTube link that you can click and you can see the implicit bias. The first Science Friday, I think it was the first Science Friday ever. I talked about implicit bias. Yeah. Ooh. I do think I have to start winding down. Uh, I do have to get back to writing the dissertation. Um, but I'm happy to just take these last couple of minutes to do any finishing thoughts, finishing questions, chat about any last minute thoughts. Um, yeah, otherwise, yeah. I mean, I'll wait the time before I say my thank yous and good nights. And if during any stream I mention information I put into chat and you want to learn more about it, I encourage you to join the Discord community. That invitation you can get it one of two ways. Um, by just typing in !Discord into the chat, you get the invite, or just in my about section, go down, go to the join us. That little badge full of sharks, you can click it and it should send you an invite. And basically in that chat in the Discord channel or community, sorry, you can post questions, comments, your thoughts, opinions, request things. I'm trying to put in also learning resources if people like. I have to work with R, the stats program. R is like a programming language, and we use it for stats. If you're interested in learning like R or Python, things like that, I already have resources for R. Um, but yeah, if you want citations, so there's a citation channel if you want like a specific study and stuff like that, or want to learn more about certain things. Um, yes, feel free to let me know, or just during any stream. You don't have to join the Discord. You can ask during any stream, and I'll try my best to get you whatever you're seeking. Anyways, awesome. I think that's all I got. Thank you. I enjoyed the stream. Thanks so much for stopping by. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was awesome chatting with you. Thanks for chatting with me. I look forward to chatting with all of you in future streams. GG. Thanks SPS for joining as well. Let's do Shark P5 GG. Boom. Um, and I hope everyone has a great day or night. And yeah, I haven't really been doing too many gaming streams because I've been really busy writing the dissertation. But And I do apologize for last Friday. I didn't get around to doing the Science Friday. I'm so sorry. I had a lot of things in personal life come up that needed to be attended to. But this Science Friday's track is on track to take place. So if scientific things have interested you today, stop in for Science Friday. That's on Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, every Friday. Cool. Thanks again, everybody, for joining me. It's been a lot of fun. Um, it's Shark Party here again, and I look forward to talking about science and education and anything like that in future streams. Have a wonderful night. Thanks again, everybody.